Hey, Sahir. Great to have you in here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We want to first talk a little bit about the problem you're solving. And the American healthcare system is very complex, and sometimes it's hard to understand what goes on under the hood that makes it so difficult to achieve sick goals. Maybe just share a little bit about Forus and what you're trying to solve.
Yeah, so what we're doing is helping people get access to medicine faster, easier, and cheaper. Something like 1 out of 3 patients with a medication for a high cost or complex condition never get their first dose. And even those that do often take weeks or months before they get that. And the reason is because there's so much complexity sitting on the shoulders of those doctors and patients to get through all the complexity of insurance coverage, of affordability, of supply chain navigation. And it really takes not just the doctor, but their whole staff to stay on top of this while dealing with all the other complexities they have running their clinic trying to see patients. And so really what you have is patients who end up getting treated with suboptimal therapies or not getting the medicine they need because of all this overhead.
You said so 1 in 3 patients, so around 30% of scripts are not filled. Tell me a little bit about patients, these patients. You said they may have complex conditions. Are they also predominantly low-income patients? Are they patients of different ethnic typesets? Tell me a little bit about who suffers most in this system as it currently works today.
Yeah, I mean, I think counterintuitively, the problem actually affects people across the board. Even those folks who have many resources, who are equipped with doctors that have large staffs and in high-end facilities, still face the same complexities because these aren't medications that are $50 versus $5. These are often $50,000 a month. And so the process you have to go through, the hoops you have to jump through actually affect almost everybody who has one of these conditions, not just those who are disenfranchised in some other way. That said, as you can imagine, there's a tremendous amount of complexity in navigating through the process. And as that falls on people who have less resources or have less training or familiarity with the system, it actually just makes it more and more difficult for them to work through the process.
And if it is so complex, is there a phenomenon where actually physicians aren't even prescribing these drugs because they look at filling the script is going to lead to a huge amount of paperwork downstream of that decision, and therefore actually it's not even a question of 1 in 3 people who aren't getting it because that they're not filling the script. It's actually upstream of that. There's a whole bunch of people that should have been prescribed that weren't.
It's not even just about the amount of work that might fall on the shoulders of the physician and the clinic. A lot of these providers and doctors are choosing to avoid not just the complexity and overhead, but also the uncertainty, right? Imagine if you're a physician treating a patient with a serious condition. They've just been diagnosed with leukemia. They've just been diagnosed with a heavy-set autoimmune disease. The last thing you want to do is tell them about how a life-changing treatment is going to turn their life around and then have them find out that they're not going to get it, right? You don't want to see their hopes go up and then come crashing down, and you don't want to be the doctor behind that. And so people are avoiding these things, not even because they're sure that they won't get it, but because they don't even want to roll the dice. And so what happens instead is doctors are prescribing medications that might have come out 10 years ago because those are safe in terms of their view of whether or not they're going to actually get in the hands of the patient. Even though the science is older, they might be less effective. They may have side effects that you don't need to have today. And instead, medications that already have taken 10 years to get from molecule to in market through the R&D and regulatory process now will wait another 10 years before they become mainstream. And so there's so much lag between the science that it is kind of continually pushing the envelope on what's possible biologically and what people are actually benefiting from in the real world.
Right, and you mentioned you're an AI company. AI's obviously play an increasing role in drug discovery, and there's a lot of exciting developments. It's an early stage, but I think everybody looking at the future says there's going to be more drugs coming out on the supply side. It sounds like there's a real problem on the demand side of how to get those drugs to people, and this is what you're solving.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think everyone today can see how much investment is going into drug discovery, everything from the labs themselves through to a tremendous number of companies putting their attention on this problem. And it's great. I mean, it's going to be really impactful for society. There's going to be so many more options for people. But the problem is all of this drug discovery just translates into more and more hypothetical molecules. And the bottleneck is really in translating those molecules into in-market production medicines. And then even once they have reached the point that they're in market, enabling them to become mass market so that all the people who need them can actually achieve them. And that's really what we're working on, is how do we build a network that can accelerate the process that goes from the point you have a drug ready to test in people until the point where everyone who needs it has it.
And how did you come across this problem? You were obviously an operator in healthcare for a number of years before founding Forus, but when was it you came across this problem, and how did you decide, hey, this is something I really want to sort of lean into and build a business around?
Yeah. So I spent a bit of my career before this at a company called Oscar, which was building a health insurance company from scratch, from the ground up. And it was an amazing learning ground for me to get exposure to the entirety of the system, all the different nooks and crannies of how there are points of friction that occur for every stakeholder involved. And I really felt like I got a crash course in why things are the way they are. But the other thing I realized while working there is, as an individual insurance company, wherever we were trying to make things different, it was very hard to solve any problem universally and durably. We could only solve some of the problems for some of the people some of the time. And I really felt like there was a huge need to pick even a slice of the challenge and really solve it in a way which is applicable to everyone who needed help, and wouldn't be something that was only transient but could help them throughout the rest of their life. And so one of the great things that happened right around the time that I was kind of poking around was, obviously, LLMs started to click. And LLMs have two great properties that we make use of. One is they can digest a tremendous amount of heterogeneous information and treat it all the same. And two is they can brute force through processes that are hard or impossible to scale with people. And together, those properties allow us to create what we think of as an abstraction or advocate layer on top of any really messy, complicated problem. And we picked medication access because not only is it the most common interaction people have with the system, but it's growing, it's recurring, usually for the rest of your life. And it's got this incredibly complicated and multi-step value and supply chain where neither the doctor nor the patient are in control. Both of them are on the same side and kind of lost in the process. And so we felt if we could solve this specific problem, taking advantage of this specific technology, we'd be able to build something that would not only help a lot of people, but really sticky and allow us to build a business around it.
And you mentioned alignment, and obviously in healthcare, one of the challenges has been about how do you get the incentives to align between the different constituent parts, whether that be payer, provider, patient, pharma, provider, patient. One of the things you've done, I think, in an interesting way is create that alignment and use that creative alignment also to accelerate adoption from all sides. Do you want to share a little bit about how you thought about that as a way to scale, which is obviously not always easy in healthcare?
Yeah, I think this is another point that's actually counterintuitive in the system. The more stakeholders there are in the process, the less any individual party has control over or even real awareness of what's going on.
Right. And how many stakeholders have we got here in this?
I mean, in this problem, you've got obviously the doctor, you've got the patient, you've got the insurance company, you've got the PBM who's working with the insurance company to administer the benefits, you've got the pharmacy, you've got the wholesaler who's selling their drugs to the pharmacy, and you've got the manufacturer who's actually making the medication, invented it.
And wants adherence.
And then even a wide variety of patient support and financial assistance foundations whose whole operation is focused on figuring out how to help people afford these medications. So you have almost 10 different parties involved in many of these transactions. And the amount of ping-ponging that an individual goes through is kind of hard to compare to anywhere else. But what that meant, in our view, was as we spent time looking at the problem, so much of the friction was not because people had different goals, but because there's so much implicit friction in this path-dependent process that's developed and calcified because of how many different people are involved and how complicated it is. And what we're trying to do is build a platform that connects the dots across these pieces and allows all that complexity to exist, but without any of the individual stakeholders having to navigate it themselves. And so without needing to kind of blow everything up, we can automate the process such that each person's getting what they need, the medication's moving through the process, the doctors are prescribing the medications they think are best, the patient's getting the medication that is going to help them feel better and live a healthier and longer life. The drug company is seeing the medicines that they've invented actually realize the impact and potential they have in the real world. And even the insurance companies who are trying to ensure that people don't go months without treatment for diseases that they need, and otherwise they're going to see patients who are going to have much worse outcomes and much higher costs downstream. And so what we're able to do is make sure that every time someone selects a therapy for a patient on our platform, we're carrying that all the way through until the patient has the medication in hand and working through all the steps with the process so everyone else's life is easier.
And sometimes when you're building a business like that, there's a sort of chicken and egg problem, right? Where do you start? You started on the provider side, is that right?
Yeah, we started on the provider side. And one of the big reasons, obviously, is because we need to build a network. And in the end, the network is made up of those providers and those patients and that prescription that's going through the system. In order to do that, and it was a part of the reason why we made this platform no cost to providers, really kind of going to folks and saying, we are going to take this problem, which is plaguing you, plaguing your clinic, plaguing your patients, and eliminate it so that it's no longer something you have to think about and you can just focus on using and prescribing and monitoring the most effective medicines for your patients. We did that, early on, just spending time with doctors who are friends of friends, family friends, someone's brother or mother or cousin. And quickly we got to a point where word started spreading. And then we've been lucky to grow now over the last couple of years, 10x the last 2 years, almost entirely through word of mouth. Now we're serving patients in, 80% of zip codes in the US already.
And give us a sense of the volume of scripts that are getting processed.
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing tens of thousands of patients every week coming to the platform. We're serving millions of people this year.
Right.
And that's growing at an exponential rate.
And so stepping back from that, how does pharma fit into, or life sciences companies fit into the equation?
Yeah. So as we're building this network, what we felt was there's a huge opportunity to really address that bottleneck I mentioned earlier, where you have so many of these medications that need to move through a handful of steps before they're really available to the people who need them. And so what we see ourselves doing is being in a position where we have unprecedented visibility into what's happening in the system. What are people being treated for? Where are medications most or least effective for them? Where do people get stuck, both on the doctor side and on the patient side? And what results in a medication being incredibly successful versus not being successful at all. And that includes clinically, financially, administratively, all the different ingredients that play a part in both patient access and also, medication growth. And so what we've then done is take that network that we're building and that visibility we have and started using it to provide insight that can help the companies making these medicines design better research, launch more efficiently, make sure that they're responding to the needs of physicians and patients more quickly, and not wasting resources in places that are not going to help move the ball forward, but really focused on doing things that are going to help unlock access for new groups of patients who really need their medicine.
And so you mentioned a third of scripts are not getting filled. You also mentioned a significant amount of time to get through prior authorization, or the complexity. Sort of how much time have you taken out? How much friction have you taken out of the system?
I mean, when we start working with a practice or provider, our goal is to make it so that they are only spending time where they're having to make clinical decisions or authorize something, but doing none of the paperwork, none of the phone calls, none of the data entry that would normally fall on their shoulders, and really, most importantly, not doing any of the navigation where they're spending hours trying to figure out what even is the process required of me to go through and get this medicine for my patients. And so we've been able to cut that complexity down by, as much as 90+% of time, and cut the amount of time that it's taking for patients to get access to their medication by 2-3x, so that they're getting medicine, in a day or two, as opposed to waiting weeks.
Fantastic. And you mentioned you were at Oscar. That was a company famous, or is a company famous for the talent it was able to attract and nurture. Talk a little bit about your own journey as a founder and building a team for this business.
Well, I learned something really valuable in my time at Oscar, which was how important it is to invest in talent, and then how to cultivate that talent once it's in the door. So first, the company was, in the early days, uncompromising about the level of talent and the caliber of people that they were bringing into the organization. And across all functions, you had people who were some of the smartest folks in their field, who were also really effective generalists who could play really multifaceted, multidisciplinary roles, and who were working together in ways where they were really pushing the envelope on not just the level of problem solving, but the level of ambition in what we were doing. One of the things that was most impactful for me in my experience there was that whenever we were talking about the work we were doing, the problems we were seeing, the solutions we were putting in place, we weren't talking about them just as if they were going to affect our company. We were really talking about them as decisions for the country, right? There was always this underlying ambition and feeling that we will inevitably be how the country's operating system works. And so every decision that we're making, every problem we're solving and we're seeing, we need to take it as seriously as if we are the people deciding how the country is going to operate, how people across the US are going to benefit from or suffer from the decisions we're making. And that not only really put gravity on the work that we're doing, but also made me and my colleagues feel a moral imperative to the work we're doing. I honestly felt like every moment I was spending at work was a way that I was helping move society forward. And so that's really something I wanted to bring into our company as we started building the team. And I mean, I think not a profound point to say that when you first start your business, every single person in the company is load bearing, right? You cannot compromise on the quality of talent. And you also need to make sure that you're putting enough effort into getting those folks. Today, the market is just so competitive. There's so many companies that are growing at such quick rates, and people are, and I think kind of unprecedented level questioning where they want to spend their time, what's the best use of their valuable years in their career to have the most impact in the world. And so in my view, it's really a total knife fight out there for talent. You have to be really focused on doing everything you possibly can to get the people you need, and not only in identifying them and evaluating them, but also in winning them, right? And making sure that they see that you feel their value and that you are going to have them be in a position where they can have a level of impact on society and technology that they have never been able to have before in their career and would have a hard time getting somewhere else. And so I think maybe the biggest piece for me has just been investing time and really focusing the effort on making sure that everything we're doing is oriented towards getting the best people we possibly can for every single role that we need.
And in healthcare, I think people are always motivated by the opportunity to make a difference, the mission of it all. But there's been frustration that technology has not played the role perhaps it has played in other industries in terms of improving access, quality, reducing cost, and the like. Is it that you're able to say, hey, talent, come to healthcare now, come to this particular problem, because the technology is really able to unlock it in a way that perhaps isn't? As you pitch for us against LLM companies, some of these forward deployment companies, is that the unlock that's happening here?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things that are coming through. I think to your point, historically, it's been challenging to see a lot of companies that are focused in the healthcare sector as having, really dramatic outcomes and moving at the pace that you're feeling from other companies that are really AI forward and technology driven.
Right.
I think a lot of that's changing for a few reasons. Number one is, I think what's most obvious to folks is that this wave of technology, the products and tools you're able to build are so dramatically more impactful that even folks who are historically conservative as customers and users are jumping out of their seat to get access to them.
Yep.
Right? You're seeing a lot of tools and products, not just ours, growing rapidly and exponentially through word of mouth.
Yes.
Because people are excited to use them. They're feeling joy using them. They're seeing the level of impact on their lives. And I think one of the things that's opening up for me is, you always hear these things about, oh, this kind of customer or industry doesn't believe in technology or is closed to new technology. And the wake up call is, no, the technology was just not that good. It wasn't good enough.
That's right.
It didn't have the leverage or benefit enough for people to get out of their seat and make a different change in how they're working. But now they can see the benefit. And so they're moving with their feet at a rate that's unprecedented. I think second is that you're also seeing that there's real opportunity to think about different types of business models and durability in businesses. And people are thinking about that a lot more. Even, folks who are early in their career are pushing on founders, and I feel this all the time, asking, well, how is your business going to continue to exist in 2 years, in 5 years?
Exactly.
What's going to keep you sticking around? What makes you different? Why you're not going to get digested and spit out by the labs? Right. And I think one of the reasons why we have invested in the business model that we have is not only because we think it allows us to help more people and reach more people more quickly, but also because it creates real durability in our business.
Right.
In the long term.
Share a little bit about that, right? How every additional script improves the business, the quality of the business.
I mean, there's some of the obvious pieces in our product, like any other, where the more volume, the more transactions, the more users using the product, the better it gets, the smarter it gets. And that's true for a lot of products. But the things that I think are more interesting than just that first element of data is the network we're building itself. Right. Over time, the durability in our business is not coming from having, slightly better models than the next guy. It's in the network we've built where we have, these hundreds of thousands of physicians and millions and tens of millions of patients on a network where every single one of them is using the product regularly, pushing their transactions through the network, benefiting from it. And then that scale allows us to earn relationships with all the other stakeholders in the ecosystem, from the insurance companies and PBMs to the pharmacies and distributors to the manufacturers and life science companies, and really connect the dots across these pieces, not only so that we can move things through the system, but so we can provide unprecedented levels of visibility and transparency to the people who need it, so that a physician can know exactly what medications are available to them, are appropriate for this patient, are likely to kind of make it into their hands, how much they're going to cost, and get that kind of tracking in real time, so that when they prescribe it, they know exactly when their patient got it, and someone is following through the full course of therapy, not just that first dispense. The patient can understand exactly how to get their medication. They're getting it faster, getting it cheaper. And all these other companies are integrating with us in a way that allows us to unlock new levels of speed, new levels of affordability. And what ends up happening then is that network, similar to other kind of marketplace and network business you've seen, has a compounding benefit where every part of the system is getting better and better and better. And so it doesn't really matter whether or not our software is fully or only partially dependent on kind of the frontier models. What matters is that we've built this network and kind of built it at scale so that we can be that core partner for every new medicine that's coming to market and unlocking access across the country.
Fantastic. And tell me about your own sort of personal journey to entrepreneurship. Did you think you were going to become an entrepreneur? You studied biochemical or biomedical engineering. You went to Oscar. What was the journey to become an entrepreneur?
I mean, I always wanted to do something big, and I felt that I was going to be in medicine, finding ways to help people live longer, but I didn't think I would be doing it by building a business. The reason I studied biomedical engineering was, for most of my early life, I thought I was going to become a researcher. I was focused on organ printing and regenerative medicine, and really thought that my life was going to be in actually creating some of these miracles in the lab so that they could then eventually make their way out to society. What happened for me was I had this very enterprising and commercially oriented advisor in college that opened my eyes to how much complexity there was in getting something from the lab into real people's hands, and how much time it took, and how much luck was involved, right? Even if you did a really genius level of research and had some epiphany, it was a total dice roll if and when it would make it to market and to real people. And that woke me up that maybe there was a different place for me to be to have the most leverage and impact, given what I thought I could contribute. I joined Oscar to move to the total opposite end of the ecosystem, right? Instead of being in the lab, being right at the nodes of delivery and focusing, okay, for the people who are disenfranchised, for people who have a hard time getting access, what is between them and having direct access to real, good quality, life-extending healthcare? And that, like I mentioned, helped me see the broader picture of how much there is in the system that sits between these inventions and the people who need them. And so I think what that kind of opened my eyes to, though, was how much ambition you could have to change the system, right? The company that I was part of was something where a few years before it existed, no one would ever even consider that it was the kind of thing you could start. People would just have assumed that the incumbents that had existed for decades were the only ones that would exist forever.
Right.
And it really kind of helped me think about, okay, if I want to solve a problem, what's the right way to do that, and how much I can take advantage of the resources available. And so I spent time there really getting familiar with how you build a business, how you think about all the different opportunities that are available to you in a marketplace and an ecosystem and an industry that is already so hard to navigate, and where you need to find traction and clarity in your users to know that you have something that works. And then I've been lucky, including obviously GC, to work with a lot of the same investors who are strong partners to Oscar through those years, which has then helped me kind of kickstart this business.
Yeah, it's interesting that effectively you worked with GC, a Rough Draft Ventures, while at Columbia. You went to Oscar, GC portfolio company, and were lucky enough to be, or privileged enough to be, your partner on this journey. I always think being an entrepreneur obviously requires ambition, it requires vision, but it also requires courage. I always feel like that's an underestimated part of the equation, that actually there's some really tough decisions to be made on that journey. You're obviously still early in the Forus journey, but when you look back on the journey today, do you look back and say, okay, wow, that was a fork in the road, and I took a decision that wasn't clear, and it took a bit of courage to make that?
I mean, I think all the way going back to the beginning of our business model, when we were first pitching the business in the early stages, including when you guys joined in to be part of our team, For the first couple of years, it was not obvious. We didn't make basically $1 of revenue
Right.
for the first 2 years of the company.
Yes.
Because we were still in a chicken part of the chicken egg
Yes.
business model. We're still just focused on building a network, just focused on making sure the product that we were building was providing utility for
Right.
physicians and patients. And that meant that, we were foregoing a lot of the obvious revenue
Monetization, right?
that people were seeing. People were seeing other companies pick up, millions, tens of millions of dollars in revenue very quickly, doing things that were often selling to the same stakeholders that we were working with, and scratching their head being like, what are these guys doing? They've got good investors, they've got a good team, and they haven't made $1 of revenue.
Right.
And some people felt like, we had a pipe dream. Like, is this money even there? Is this really a sustainable business model? I think we felt at the beginning, we've done the research, we spent time understanding kind of the market, and we feel really clear that there's a humongous overlooked opportunity here to really change the way medicine works in this country. And we just need to be patient, because not taking the easy money is what's going to allow us to grow to really unprecedented scale. And we're not chasing, a few dollars here or there or short-term value extraction. We're chasing ubiquity. We want to be part of the fabric of how this happens in this country and really be an accelerant for the industry, so that there are an order of magnitude more medicines available to people in the next few years as we kind of scale up. And I think sticking to that throughout the process, including when there were opportunities that came to us where we could have made millions or tens of millions of dollars in some cases by jumping on specific opportunities that came to us that were, not consistent with the way we viewed the world, was challenging. And even some of our team questioned it sometimes, felt like, well, maybe we should try this and then we can kind of work to this in the long term. But I think being uncompromising about that has been what's then allowed us to see this, really rapid acceleration, and also maintain consistency in the message we're delivering to all our users and our customers about what we stand for and what we're trying to do here.
And if you sort of roll forward 5 years, what's the vision for the business in the future? Where would you like to be?
Yeah. So near term, what we're focused on is getting our platform into every doctor's office in the country.
Right.
We think that this problem is ever present for physicians and patients, and is present in everything from small dermatologist offices through to large cancer centers, from private practices in rural areas to, New York City academic health systems. And it is not only complicated in an individual clinic, but in aggregate, there's way more complexity to navigate. You can imagine, as we scale up and grow to different zip codes in different states and different insurance plans and different specialties, the amount of complexity and heterogeneity that we're managing is increasing exponentially. Right. It's not the same as some other products where, one, bank or law firm or tech company or engineering team is pretty similar to the next. These folks are not the ones in control of the workflows that they're working through. They're, subject to the environments that they're in. And so we're really trying to accommodate all these different environments. And so when we're building models and agents to kind of navigate all this complexity, we need to basically continually regeneralize what we're building, as well as then add in functionality that allows us to accommodate all the specific needs of the different types of physicians and patients we're serving, right? How do we make sure that the same platform that can support people with pills that they need at the GI clinic can help those who are getting chemotherapy? Right. And so that's our core focus in the near term, and really what we're trying to do to make sure that product is ubiquitous and helping everyone it can. And as we build that network through that product, we see in the future a place where we can be a core partner to every life science company, every medicine company bringing a new drug to market, where we can help dramatically reduce the amount of time and cost it takes, so that both large companies can, rather than only putting out 1 or 2 or 3 drugs out a year, can be putting out tens, if not, hundreds of drugs out in every kind of period of time eventually. And then biotechs, who today often have to wait to be acquired and hope that eventually a drug gets pulled off the shelf to bring to market, can go commercial themselves, can bring their own therapies to market. And increasingly what we really want to do is make it so science is the only limit to the medicine people have access to.